Can you see me? Yeah, you can see me because I can see myself. Hey, we're all back from Thanksgiving. Well, I'm back, so that's what matters, right? Because I'm teaching you guys some American history. Now, this new unit we're going over is the Civil Rights era. So, Civil Rights very important, probably my favorite era to teach that we have in American history too. So I'm going to go over it, and then I'm going to go through two different PowerPoints today, so you guys get a little treat here, okay? Because I'm trying to get a lot covered here before the final exam. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Now, one thing that students often they think the civil rights era was so long ago. Okay, it wasn't really. I mean, I know I'm old compared to you guys, but I don't feel like I'm like super old or ancient. And my parents grew up during the civil rights era, so I can talk. My parents are still living. Yes, I can talk to them about this because when my father first started school, he only went to school with white students. All right, because that was the law. All right, and that's what I'm gonna. Not because he was. That's what he wanted to do. That was literally the law in the South. So this is let's get into it. Old laws. This is what the whole Brown versus Board assignment was about. Remember that 14th Amendment says that all citizens are have equal protection, no matter if you're tall, really athletic, have a nice mustache, and wear polo shirts, or you don't. Okay, we're all protected. We're all have equal protection with that 14th Amendment. The 15th Amendment says that African American males, or it doesn't say that African American males. It says that the right to vote shall not be discriminated upon the basis of race. Well, that was ignored in the South too because they would not let African Americans vote in the South, and I'm going to explain to you why, or ways they got around this, okay, and ways they got around the 14th Amendment. And the Constitution, it was largely ignored. The 14th and 15th Amendment are in the United States Constitution, but it was ignored in southern states. So what we have in the southern states at the time was just a policy of discrimination towards African Americans. And these are ways that they did that. So with the Jim Crow laws, this is how they got past that 15th Amendment. They said that, all right, you're African American, well, you got to pay a tax to vote. All right, you got to pay money to vote. Now, this is again, this is unconstitutional, but that's what they did, and so a lot of African Americans weren't very rich in the South. They didn't have a lot of money, so they would say, "Well, I'm not paying a tax to vote, or I don't have the money to vote." Another one, the grandfather clause. They said, "Well, you can only vote if your grandfather can vote." Well, during this time, we're only removed about 70, 80 years from the Civil War. A lot of African Americans' grandfathers could not vote, okay, because maybe they were enslaved. And so that's an issue. There's something else called a literacy test. And often these tests, I think I mentioned this to you earlier in the semester. Often these tests were given in a foreign language, a different language, to where African Americans cannot understand what was going on, what the test was about. Or you also have to remember there was a decent amount of African Americans as well as white people in the South at the time who were illiterate. They could not read. So how are they going to pass the test if you can't read? And so that happened. It happened with some whites too, who had to take that test. And sometimes with the literacy test, I show a movie Selma. It's a good movie. Sometimes with the literacy test, they would give it to the voters verbally, and they would just keep upping the questions until the person missed a question. Okay, and then they'd say, "Well, you can't vote." All right, like they'd say, "Hey, name every federal judge in the federal judge circuit." Well, I guarantee you, if they ask me that, I'm going to fail. All right, because I can't name them all. I doubt anybody here that teaches at school can name every single one of them. So they were designed, these things are designed, these Jim Crow laws are designed to disenfranchise or keep African Americans from voting. And remember, all the way going back to 1896 with that separate but equal doctrine in that Plessy versus Ferguson case, it says that separate facilities are basically okay. It's a black mark on the Supreme Court, but saying that separate facilities are okay, it just shows that this racist prejudice, ideal sentiment, ideas that are going on in the South, in the southern states. So how do things start to change? Well, after World War II, you have in the military the integration of the units, and so World War II exposed segregated units, because a lot of African Americans said, "Hold on a second, we just fought this war for our country." Now they fought in segregated units, but we fought this war for the country, and we got to come home and we're treated like second-class citizens. That something is wrong with that. So Harry Truman starts to integrate the units. All right, integrate the military units, because it's seen as making the military stronger and providing more unity. So you have that. Jackie Robinson, first major league professional, or the first professional baseball, African American baseball player in the major leagues. All right. And then you have a Supreme Court decision. This is important. Brown versus Ford decision in 1954, 58 years after that Plessy versus Ferguson decision, but it overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. It said segregation is not equal, separate is not equal. All right, we have to integrate our schools, and so it starts with Brown versus Ford there. So, but that's in the school system. But again, it's going to take a while for this integration to take place. And you have in Selma, Alabama, 1955, it's Rosa Parks there. I think you've all heard of her story. Anyways, she refused to give up her seat on the bus, and so now the busing system in Selma, Alabama is boycotted. All right, led by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "Hey, look, he was head of this group called the SCLC, or Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and what he said was, all right, let's boycott this busing system in Alabama." So that's what they did, and so with that, you have this group called the Freedom Riders, is what it was known as. You have blacks and whites protesting the busing system, all right, and in order to try to integrate the busing system, all right. That's what the Freedom Riders did. There's Rosa Parks again, all right. She's being detained for not giving up her seat. The NAACP is important, all right. This is on the quiz, because they have been fighting the segregation. They took a different route. They tried to fight it through the court system. Thurgood Marshall was their leader. He was general counsel for the NAACP, and so they tried to fight racism or segregation through the court system. Dr. Martin Luther King, him and the SCLC, through peaceful protest. And again, they take a different one. Belief in nonviolent resistance. That was Dr. Martin Luther King's. That was his tactic, and what it did. So he believed that if they peacefully protested and then there was violence towards them, then it would look bad upon the people who were using violence. And so that's why he's pushing for nonviolence. He got this from Mahatma Gandhi, who was a leader of civil rights in India. Okay, so this is Dr. Martin Luther King's philosophy, and his followers in that Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that was their philosophy. Remember, nonviolence. Now we're going to look at Malcolm X, who had a kind of a different philosophy than Dr. King. So you have the NAACP, who's trying to end this thing through courts. Dr. Martin Luther King, nonviolent protest, and then once we get to the other one, I'll go over that once we get to the Nation of Islam. So In the schooling, there's resistance to this integration. There's resistance to this decision of Brown versus Board. So in Little Rock, Arkansas, what they did was they tried to integrate the school at Little Rock High School in Arkansas. There's 9 students, known as the Little Rock 9, who go in there, 9 African American students trying to integrate the school. Well, the governor, I think his last name was Falva, so I can't remember his first name. But he orders the National Guard, because that's who the governor is in charge of, the National Guard, to block the students from coming in, to stop the black or African American students from coming into the high school there. He doesn't want to integrate the school. President Eisenhower, now this has to do with federalism because the national government is supreme to the state government. President Eisenhower says, no, okay, Falveston governor, you're wrong. I'm going to send in federal troops, and we're going to allow this school to be integrated. And so there's another picture. And so that's the end of that one. Now I'm going to go through another slideshow. So hey, you're welcome. You get a little bit more going on here with the civil rights movement. And so, ready? Here it goes. Boom. So the movement's growing. All right. This is important. In Greensboro, you have what's a sit-in movement led by the SLCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. What they did to protest segregation is to protest segregation was they started sitting at the lunch counters in Greensboro, at the Woolworths lunch counter, where only white customers could sit. So the African American students there at North Carolina A&T, which is in Greensboro, started sitting where they weren't supposed to sit. They were sitting at the only white section. So you have that with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The Freedom Riders, there's a picture of some Freedom Riders who their bus was targeted or firebombed. Okay, that's what was going on with there. Remember, the Freedom Riders were protesting the segregation of the busing system in Selma or in Montgomery, Alabama. There are some pictures of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, those students from North Carolina A&T trying to integrate the lunch counter at the Woolworths lunch counter in Greensboro. There's just some more violent pictures towards. So remember, a lot of these protesters, even though they were peaceful, even though Dr. Martin Luther King was advocating peaceful protests, they were treated with violence. James Meredith, all right, at University of Mississippi, he's trying to integrate this school. Now he was a veteran, an Air Force veteran, and he's trying to integrate the school in Mississippi. Okay, another figure, George Wallace, the governor of Alabama. So much like the governor of Arkansas tried to stop those students from integrating these high school in Arkansas, Governor George Wallace in Alabama said, no, I'm not allowing segregation in Alabama. And so he tried to stop that from happening in Alabama. But President Kennedy sent in troops again to integrate the schools in Alabama, and he integrate in Mississippi with James Meredith, who was going to school in Mississippi at the university. There's a picture of him. Okay, a march on Washington. You have Dr. King leading this march to promote civil rights. They use the I Have a Dream speech. Again, this is 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. And even though African Americans had gotten their freedom, they still weren't supplied with all the rights that an American citizen should be afforded. Civil rights legislation. So here you have President Kennedy. This isn't him, this is Lyndon Johnson. President Kennedy had been an advocate for civil rights. Remember, he's the one that helped integrate the college in Mississippi. And he got killed. He was assassinated by a former Marine assassinated him. And you had Lyndon Johnson is vice president taking over, and Lyndon Johnson does follows up with Kennedy's goals for civil rights and starts passing these civil rights acts to further enhance civil rights. So he comes up with the Civil Rights Act 1964, ending segregation in all public places. All right. The passage of the 24th Amendment, which banned or outlawed poll tax, all right, allowing voting in Mississippi, and then the Voting Rights Act of 1966. So there was a march from Selma to Montgomery. That's what the whole movie, the movie Selma, is about. It's a good movie. I would recommend seeing it, as I would recommend watching my YouTube videos here. And so